The ground moves before the wave arrives. A deep groan, not from earth but from steel. Then the air turns sweet. Sickeningly sweet. Boston's North End, January 15, 1919. A Wednesday. The temperature has climbed unusually warm for winter. The streets are alive with people. Near the waterfront stands a tank. 50 feet tall, 90 feet wide. It is not beautiful. It was never meant to be. Inside, 2.3 million gallons of raw industrial molasses, enough to fill 3 Olympic pools, arrived by ship days ago, still warm from the Caribbean. The tank was built in 1915 by a man who had never built a tank before. It was never properly tested. Neighbors said it groaned at night and leaked. The company painted it brown not to hide the leaks, they said, but neighbors knew better. Children scraped leaked molasses from the ground with sticks and ate it. On this morning, something has changed. The temperature dropped below 0 days ago. Now it climbs rapidly. Warm air reaches cold molasses, and molasses, when it warms, expands. At 12:30 in the afternoon, the waterfront is busy. Firefighters eat lunch 50 feet from the tank. Workers unload a truck nearby. A grandmother hangs laundry from her window. Then, a sound unlike anything heard before. Survivors struggle to describe it. Some say machine gun. Some say cannon. One man says the city itself tore in half. The wave is 25 feet tall, moving at 35 miles per hour, weighing over 13,000 tons, and going in every direction at once. The fire station is hit first. The wave punches through solid brick walls like paper. Firefighter George Leigh is swept through a collapsing wall and carried into the harbor. He will not survive. The elevated railway overhead cast iron, built to hold trains, buckles and collapses. A train was due on that track in 4 minutes. For minutes. The wave splits. One arm rushes north toward the waterfront. Another turns south into the narrow streets of the North End, the most densely populated neighborhood in America. Workers from the Public Works Department are eating lunch in a wooden shack near the dock. The wave hits. There is nothing left. The men are found hours later in the harbor floor. In the North End buildings, the molasses presses through doorways and up stairwells. The pressure is enormous. Walls crack but hold. The people inside cannot open their doors. The horses cannot climb stairs. The wave catches them in the street. Their legs are seized by the molasses, thickening as it cools. They cannot stand. They cannot move. They can only scream. The wave takes 90 seconds from rupture to stillness. 90 seconds. The tank held 2.3 million gallons. Empty in a minute and a half. Then silence. The first people to respond are the firefighters from Engine 31, those who survived. They crawl from the wreckage of their own station and begin pulling people from the syrup with their bare hands. Within minutes, a U.S. Navy ship docked at the nearby pier, the USS Nantucket, sends its entire crew ashore. Sailors in white uniforms wade into the molasses alongside the firefighters. The problem that nobody anticipated, the molasses is becoming a trap for the rescuers themselves. Every step requires enormous effort. Men sink to their thighs and cannot pull themselves free without help. The substance that killed is now imprisoning those trying to help. The Red Cross arrives, then the Boston Police, then the Massachusetts State Guard. Within an hour, over 100 men are working the disaster zone, and still, the molasses holds its victims. Among the missing, Bridget Clougherty, a 65-year-old widow who lived in a wooden house directly beside the tank. Her house is simply gone. Not damaged, gone. It will take days to find her. Rescue dogs are brought in. They cannot work. Their paws sink and stick. The handlers pull them back before they too are trapped. Even the animals cannot enter this place. The victims who are found alive face a new horror. The molasses is in their lungs. Every breath pulls against it. Doctors at the scene realize that some survivors are not drowning in water, they are suffocating in sugar. By nightfall, the final count is becoming clear. 21 people are dead. 150 are injured. The youngest victim is a 10-year-old boy named Pasquale Iantosca, who was collecting firewood near the tank when it burst. The cleanup will take weeks. The city deploys fire hoses, but fresh water only spreads the molasses further. Salt water, they discover, begins to break it down. The harbor becomes the cleaning agent. Boston Harbor runs brown for months. The smell does not leave. Weeks pass, then months. Residents of the North End open their windows in spring, and the sweetness is still there, embedded in the brick, in the wood, in the soil. Some say that on hot summer days, even decades later, you could still smell it. But even before the cleanup is finished, the question is being asked in every newspaper in America: who is responsible? The United States Industrial Alcohol Company has an answer ready. They blame anarchists. It is 1919. The Red Scare is at its height. Anarchist bombings are real. They have happened in Boston and across the country. The company's claim is designed to land in fertile soil. And for a moment, it works. 7 months after the disaster, 119 plaintiffs sue United States Industrial Alcohol. The case becomes one of the longest civil trials in Massachusetts history. The trial opens in 1920. The company's defense is aggressive. Their lawyers suggest the tank was sabotaged. They bring in their own engineers who testify the structure was sound. They suggest the victims were partly to blame for living so close to an industrial facility. The plaintiff's attorney is a man named Damon Hall. He does something no lawyer had done before in a case like this. He hires scientists, not engineers paid to agree, but independent experts, tasked only with finding the truth. Scientists examine the tank and uncover a shocking truth. The steel was only half as thick as it should have been. The tank was never strong enough to hold its contents. Furthermore, when the tank was first filled with water for a pressure test, it leaked so badly that the company simply painted it brown and called the test complete. The test was falsified, the record was signed, and 2.3 million gallons of molasses were poured inside. The trial runs for 3 years. Nearly 1,000 witnesses are called. 45,000 pages of testimony are generated. It becomes the most complex civil case Massachusetts had ever seen, and the company fights every inch of it. In 1925, 6 years after the Wave, the court-appointed auditor delivers his verdict. He finds the company entirely at fault. The steel was defective. The construction was negligent. The falsified inspection was criminal. The anarchist claim, baseless. The company is ordered to pay $628,000 in damages, the largest industrial accident settlement in Massachusetts history. The victims finally receive it 6 years later. But the disaster leaves behind one lasting question. Who is responsible when profit ignores safety? The Boston molasses disaster begins to answer it. The disaster exposed a shocking truth. In 1919, almost no laws regulated industrial construction. Companies could build massive tanks without any government approval. After the disaster, Massachusetts required engineering oversight for large industrial structures. Other states followed, helping shape modern safety laws. Now let us go back to before the Wave, back to the men who built the tank and the decisions that were made in boardrooms far from Boston's North End, because the disaster did not begin on January 15, 1919. It began 4 years earlier. In 1915, the United States Industrial Alcohol Company needs a molasses storage facility in Boston fast. The war in Europe is consuming industrial alcohol at enormous rates. Alcohol is needed for munitions. There is money to be made, vast amounts of it. They hire Arthur Gell to oversee construction. Gell is a treasurer. He has no engineering experience. None. He is chosen not for his expertise but for his loyalty to the company and for his willingness not to ask difficult questions. The tank is built in record time. Weak steel is approved without an engineer, and the tank quickly rises. During its pressure test, the tank leaks badly. Instead of rebuilding it, the leaks are sealed with cement, and the tank is approved. Now the tank is filled not with water, but with 700,000 gallons of molasses. It holds, just barely. The company considers this a success. They order more and more. Shipment after shipment arrives from the Caribbean. From 1915 to 1919, residents repeatedly complain. The tank groans in the wind, and its leaking molasses is visible to everyone. Nothing changes. The residents' complaints are ignored, while the company remains protected by powerful business interests. And so we return to January 15th, to the warm day, to the fermentation, to the 12:30 in the afternoon when the pressure inside the tank reaches a number the steel was never designed to hold. One final moment before everything changes. The rivet does not hold, and then neither does the one beside it. And the one beside that, a chain failure moving at the speed of sound through steel, and then the tank does not crack. It does not split. It explodes. In the first 3 seconds, the wave travels 150 feet. It hits the fire station, the elevated trestle, and the waterfront warehouses simultaneously. 3 structures, 3 seconds, all of them gone. Inside the fire station, Lieutenant John Driscoll is thrown from his chair by the impact. The wall behind him collapses. He crawls through the rubble and immediately begins shouting for his men, counting voices in the darkness. Some do not answer. Firefighter McMullen is found pinned under a collapsed beam, molasses rising around his face. His colleagues reach him with seconds to spare, lifting the beam with bare hands, the way men do when there is no other option. On the harbor side, the wave strikes the moored vessels. Small boats are lifted completely out of the water and deposited onto the dock. One tugboat is found a quarter-mile from where it was moored, sitting upright in the middle of Commercial Street. In the North End streets, the wave has slowed, but slow molasses in a narrow street is still a death trap. Maria D'Stasio, age 10, is running home from school. She turns the corner onto Copp's Hill Terrace. The wave meets her there. She survives. A neighbor pulls her from a second-floor window using a knotted bedsheet. The molasses takes her shoes, takes the corner of the street. But Maria D'Stasio lives, and 80 years later, she will describe the smell to a historian. Sweet, unbearably sweet. Not everyone has a neighbor with a bedsheet. Antonio D'Stasio, Maria's father, is working at the freight house beside the tank when the wave strikes. He is found 6 hours later. He is among the 21 dead. The city's hospitals are overwhelmed. Patients and rescuers arrive covered in molasses, making them almost impossible to tell apart. Boston's telephone exchange is flooded. Operators handle over 10,000 calls in 2 hours, connecting rescue teams, hospitals, and emergency services. By midnight, the area is sealed. The freezing molasses hardens, trapping everything inside until morning. The next morning, the city wakes to something unprecedented. Every newspaper in America carries the story. In New York, Chicago, San Francisco, the headline is the same. Boston has been swallowed by molasses. By the second day, the smell turns unbearable. The fermented molasses fills the air, and even cloth masks offer no relief. The cleanup requires 87,000 man-hours of labor. It takes 4 months for Commercial Street to be fully reopened. The harbor itself runs brown until summer, and the cost to the company, to the city, to the families is staggering. We know these details today because of one man, Hugh W. Ogden, the court-appointed auditor who heard the case. He spent 3 years reading every document, interviewing every witness, examining every piece of evidence. He was a retired Army colonel. He was meticulous. He was incorruptible. Ogden's report runs to thousands of pages, but its conclusion is simple. The tank failed because it was built badly, inspected fraudulently, and operated recklessly. Every death, every injury, every destroyed home was preventable. Every single one. The company appeals. The Massachusetts Supreme Court upholds Ogden's findings. The company pays. And Arthur Gell, the man who signed the fraudulent inspection, is never criminally charged. Not 1 day in prison. History, for a long time, does not remember the Boston molasses disaster. It is crowded out by the flu pandemic of 1918, by Prohibition, by the Roaring Twenties. The 21 dead are buried and mostly forgotten by anyone who was not there. But the people of the North End do not forget. In the Italian and Irish community, the story passes from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild. The smell, the sound, the wave. It lives in the neighborhood's memory long after the history books move on. It is not until 1965, 46 years after the disaster, that a historian named Jonathan Kahn begins the first serious academic study of the event. He interviews survivors. Some are in their 80s, some weep, some cannot finish their sentences. There is a popular legend about the Boston molasses disaster that on hot summer days in the North End, you can still smell it. Historians and scientists have investigated this claim seriously. Their conclusion: it is probably not true. Probably. Today, a small plaque marks the site of the disaster on Commercial Street. It is modest, easy to walk past. Most tourists do, most Bostonians do, but those who stop and read it stand there a moment longer than they planned. What does it mean that a wave of molasses killed 21 people? It means that somewhere, at some point, a man in a suit decided that the cost of building the tank correctly was too high, and 21 people paid for that decision with their lives. Every safety law passed after the disaster, every inspection requirement, every engineering certification, every penalty for falsifying a structural test exists because 21 people died in Boston on a warm January afternoon. Their deaths made the law. The horses caught in the flood, 15 of them, could not be saved. Animal rescue workers arrived, but the molasses had set too firmly. The decision was made quickly, humanely, and without ceremony. It was the kindest thing left to do. The cat belonging to the fire station, a tabby named Engine, who lived in the station and slept on the fire truck, is found alive 3 days later, sitting on top of the collapsed roof, thin and matted with molasses, but alive. The firefighters consider this a miracle. After the disaster, the company quietly restructures, hiding its assets behind subsidiaries to avoid accountability. It does not work. The courts pierce the corporate structure. The plaintiff's lawyers follow the money. The $628,000 judgment is paid. Justice, in this case, is slower than the wave, but it arrives. Now consider this: the same tank design, the same inadequate steel grade, the same pressure calculations was used for 3 other molasses tanks owned by the same company in other American cities. After Boston, those tanks were quietly reinforced. No announcement, no admission, just steel added in the night. The science of what happened on January 15th has been studied seriously only in recent decades. In 2016, a team from Harvard University built a scale model of the tank and simulated the rupture. Their findings confirmed what the 1925 trial established: the steel was simply not strong enough. Physics does not lie. The Harvard team also solved a mystery that had puzzled scientists for decades. Why did the wave move so fast? Molasses is thick, slow. We think of it as the very metaphor for slowness. And yet the wave traveled at 35 miles per hour. How? The answer: under extreme pressure and at the right temperature, molasses stops behaving like a thick syrup and begins behaving like water. The rupture happened so fast, and the pressure was so enormous, that the molasses essentially became a liquid projectile. A 13,000-ton liquid projectile. After the initial wave passed and the pressure dropped, the molasses returned to its natural state: thick, slow, viscous. And that is what trapped people. That is what drowned the horses. The weapon that struck fast became the prison that held slow. The Boston molasses disaster is not the strangest industrial accident in history. It is not the deadliest. It is not the most dramatic. But it may be the most instructive, because every element that caused it is still present in the world today. Profit over safety, unqualified oversight, falsified inspections, ignored complaints from powerless communities. The tank in Boston burst in 1919, but the conditions that built it, those have never fully gone away. There is one more thing about the Boston molasses disaster that history records, one detail that sits quietly at the edge of every account. Easy to overlook. The tank was originally rated for 1.5 million gallons. On January 15, 1919, it held 2.3 million. The company had exceeded its own tank's capacity by over 50%, because a Caribbean shipment arrived and there was nowhere else to store it, because emptying the tank first would have cost time, because the deadline for the next delivery was close, because money. And so we come to the end, to what remains: the 21 dead, the 150 injured, the horses, the cat, the plaque on Commercial Street, the laws that exist because they did not. This is what the wave left behind. The next time you pass something large and industrial, a tank, a factory, a pipeline running through a neighborhood, and you wonder whether someone checked it, whether the specifications are correct, whether the inspection was real, the answer, thanks to Boston, is more likely to be yes. More likely, not certain. Because the lesson of the Boston molasses disaster is not that we solved the problem of industrial negligence. The lesson is what negligence costs, and we have to keep learning it. On January 15th, every year, the North End is quiet in a particular way. Not officially, there is no ceremony, but some of the older families still know the date. And on warm winter days, especially the kind that shouldn't be warm, they notice. The ground moved before the wave arrived. It always does. The question is whether anyone is paying attention, whether anyone is listening to the groan in the steel, the seep at the rivet, the child's complaint that no one filed. Don't forget to subscribe for more.